mammals, which do control their own temperature, the physiological change in there is enormous. It begs the imagination, in fact, the number of changes that would have to happen for that to occur. So if you're going to say that mammals evolved from reptiles, well, you better have some pretty good evidence that all of the changes that need to be made in terms of the animal's physiology and being able to control their own temperature have been accounted for. Because remember, the only change that is going to occur occurs when a cell divides and you get a mutation. So you can't just have a single mutation that does that. It's too much.
Got it.
And that's
So
the
you
thing.
have
And
these.
that,
There's one book I had, I forget the author, but I think the title is something like Billions of Missing Links. That's not just a missing link, but the more you press the evolutionary structure, you have this endless missing links, and this would be an obvious one. So just to be clear then, there are things science can do and can't do. And you have a leap here where evolutionists have to speculate, but you're saying scientifically that it doesn't work. You can't link the things together, or you need an answer as to how it worked. Basically, science could say that a piece of metal could not evolve into a bird because there's nothing in that metal that could evolve into a bird. Science could say that. So when you're pressing scientific definitions on evolution, you're finding it in certain ways to be contrary to science.
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And remember, what evolution says is that it is science and it is fact. And that goes to back to people like Richard Dawkins that are press this on, and also Bill Nye, the science guy.
Yeah.
He says that. The thing is, they make those claims, but they have no basis to make them. There's no science there. And that's the big thing. And so what happens is, how can they possibly say it's the truth? And yet, you cannot teach creation in schools. You cannot even question evolutions that it might not be true. And at the same time, science would require, you had mentioned abiogenesis. All right. If that is correct, then you have to show in the laboratory that starting from scratch, just inorganic chemicals, you have to create a whole living cell which is capable of reproducing itself and carrying on all the functions. That has never been done. 2,700 papers have been published on how you can get this protein or that protein or possibly some nucleic acid component, but no one has figured out how to put a whole living cell together. And one of the things science requires is that that limitation needs to be almost put up in neon lights. It has not been done. It's just speculation.
All right, so let's go from the small to the large. Again, I'm speaking with Dr. Robert Wilson, his book, Nullifying God, Evolution's Endgame. Let's say some people still have a hard time conceptualizing the cell. It's so tiny. How can so much be going on in there? Which to me, just again, as a non-scientist, I look at that and say, of course, God created the whole thing, obviously. But let's look at the bigger picture. Let's look at a giraffe. You have a chapter on that. And a giraffe is what can be over 10 tons, the tallest animal, the whole bit. Why does a giraffe work against the theory of evolution?
Well, because there's no explanation of how it occurred. Again, remember, the whole mechanism of evolution are single mutations which are totally accidental, purposeless. Now, when you get to the giraffe, you're dealing with an animal that has a neck that goes on, 12 to 16 feet up. You have a heart that has to push blood up into its head to get to the brain. And the blood pressure of giraffes are enormous. If a human being had a blood pressure like a giraffe has, you'd be in the emergency room and it would be almost like a stroke. So it's not just the lengthening of the neck. It's the lengthening of every organ that goes up in the neck, all the nerves, the blood vessels, everything else to take care of that higher pressure, and that just doesn't happen by random. In fact, there was an article I read where an author who was an evolutionist, he said, why don't we look at the whole animal? There's a problem here. And the whole animal is not looked at. They look back at fossils. So here's an early giraffe, short neck, longer neck, and now we have this one here. Well, how in the world, physiologically, did that occur? There is no explanation whatsoever, and biologically, there is none to be had. It just is impossible.
All right, so this sounds so clear, so compelling. I've not heard strong answers from evolutionists in terms of when they're challenged with something like this, but you got your PhD, was it Rutgers University?
Yes, it was.
All right, so PhD in zoology. I'm sure you studied with people that had different worldviews and things like that. What if we had Richard Dawkins on, if we had Bill Nye on or someone else, and we brought up the giraffe, how would they respond to what seems to be an obvious problem?
I think that would be a very interesting question, and the answer is I don't know. They would probably avoid it if they could, because they are not trained in any kind of physiology. As I said, any of the evolution books I have, and one particular one that had 5 authors, beautiful book by the Cold Spring Harbor Symposium group, they don't touch that kind of thing. It is all the same thing. We start here and we go to this animal, we go to that animal, we go to that animal, but there's no hesitation. There's no what if. There's no skepticism. And the point is, they could not, Bill Nye could not explain that. He would look at what he calls evolution, not him particularly, but what is characterized as evolution. For example, the blowfly, if it's treated with diazonone, it's killed, except a few of them do escape. And because diazonone is a mutagen, it knocks out the enzyme which would normally be affected by it. And so all of a sudden you've got this new population come up, they're resistant to diazonone, and all of a sudden you've got, well, there's evolution. You see that? No, that has nothing to do with evolution. Let's keep a clear definition of what it is. You start off with inorganic elements at the beginning. Those somehow form a first cell, which then somehow goes along and forms all the organisms that are on the earth today, and that would include us. We come from inorganic elements, but yet there is absolutely no evidence to support that.
And when you bottom line it, evolution has no explanation for the origin of matter. Evolution has no explanation for the origin of life. Evolution has no explanation for the origin of self-consciousness that human beings uniquely experience. And we have answers for all of them scripturally and before God. Hey, Dr. Wilson, we're out of time, but thank you for taking the time to write this book. And friends, I hope that as you're listening and watching, you'll pick this up, Nullifying God, Evolution's Endgame. We just scratched the surface today. All right, we'll be right back with a radical change in topic. We're going to talk about money in the gospel, an angle you haven't thought about.
This is Ann Graham Lotz with Daily Light for Daily Living. When was the last time you prayed on your knees?
Hey friends, I want to take a moment to thank you for standing with us and show you firsthand where your funds have gone, the renovations, the upgrades to our studio, and what we've been able to accomplish with your help. Hey, come around here. I want you to see something. I don't think we've ever shown this before. So this is how things operate. All this brand new, just in recent months, recent weeks. Right there, big screen, as I can see what's happening that we need to be seeing. Over here are different clocks for radio for different segments in time. Over here, this is, if we're putting things on live stream, you're going to see what I'm seeing right here.
Over here, this is where I'm in contact with the rest of the radio studios. Calls come in, I interact over there. And right over there, you can see where there's a second camera. That will be used when we have guests in studio so that we can get everyone on camera. Right now, we haven't been able to do that, but we're going to be able to do that. This is also going to enable us to have different angles as we do Skype videos and Skype debates. But let me show you some of the most exciting stuff. Hey, come this way. All right, I want you to meet Caleb. Caleb is our video, audio, computer tech expert. He's new here. He's only part-time. We need him here full-time. We are now able to do our daily live stream of our radio show. So you're watching it on video. You're hearing an audio clip on the radio. You're watching a video on YouTube. Something happens in the news, boom, they're on it. We've got high-tech equipment. Pull it up, put it on the screen. I can talk about it, read it to you as you're watching at home. It's amazing. And we now have new equipment that's going to enable me on the road to do high-quality live stream of my radio show in America, even in other countries. And oh, we got a big gap here. We need a major new computer. Not only will it enable us to get things out even more quickly, so if something happens in the news, you're frustrated out. What does Dr. Brown have to say? No problem. We got it covered within minutes. It's up, it's out. But we need this for post-production as well. We need one more person sitting here. If you can believe it, the 1,000+ videos that we have out, plus we record in there from the Ask Me Anything broadcast for God TV and the NRB TV Line of Fire broadcast, recorded right in there in our studio. We do all of that with me and 1.5 employees. We need to add Caleb full-time. We need one more person in here. We need that computer. With that, friends, the sky is the limit for what we can put out. We are your voice of moral, cultural, and spiritual revolution. Help us amplify your voice. Together we're making a difference. A generation is being impacted. So your one-time gift goes a long way, really, in helping us advance this Jesus revolutionary cause. And we'll be back with more updates as they happen.
Is Dr. Michael Brown.
Welcome to the Line of Fire. This is Michael Brown. Delighted to be with you, and I want to talk to you about money and the gospel, but perhaps from a perspective that you may not be familiar with. You may not be used to hearing, and I think it's going to get you thinking. All right. If you have a question for me, phone lines are open: 866-34-TRUTH, 866-3487-884. In fact, Howard, whatever in the world people want to ask me about, I may get to some random calls unrelated to the subject at hand. So phone lines are open. Any question you want to ask, 866-34-TRUTH. First, let me read to you from 1 Timothy chapter 6. Paul, after exhorting slaves and masters, says this in verse 3: if anyone teaches other doctrine and does not agree with the sound teaching of our Lord Jesus the Messiah and with the teaching that promotes godliness, he is conceited, understanding nothing, but has a sick interest in disputes and arguments over words. From these come envy, quarreling, slander, evil suspicions, and constant disagreement among people whose minds are depraved and deprived of the truth, who imagine that godliness is a way to material gain. So he is speaking of people who are divisive and destructive and in the flesh and sinful, and says these people also think that godliness is a way to material gain. Now, I think of precious brothers and sisters around the world who are suffering for the gospel at this moment. I think of those who have lost everything for Jesus. I think of those who have literally been killed for their faith, people that I know personally, for the gospel. I think of those who live with deprivation in an ongoing way to bring the gospel to others who don't know Jesus. And it is not laughable, it is pitiful that some people think that godliness is a means to financial gain. You say, but wait a second. What about the guy that used to be an alcoholic, that gambled away his money and drank away his money, left his family destitute, went from job to job, and then got radically born again, got free from alcohol, got free from gambling, became a devoted father, a devoted husband, a hard worker, lived by biblical principles, was frugal and generous, and ended up becoming wealthy all through the gospel. No one's disputing that. And there are many wonderful scriptures about generosity and God's blessing on those who are generous. And there are many wonderful scriptures about hard work and the ethic of hard work and being good stewards and being frugal. So, amen to that testimony. Let it be multiplied 1,000,000 times over. That does not negate that it is a corrupt attitude to think that godliness is the means of financial gain. It is one thing to say that godly living bears fruit in many different areas. It is another thing to think, oh, if I get saved, I can get rich. Oh, if I follow Jesus, I can get wealthy. That is corrupt and ugly and destructive. So far, I'm not saying anything controversial, I hope. This is basic Bible. And then Paul says this, but godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world and we take nothing out. But if we have food and clothing, we'll be content with these. Then he says this, but those who want to be rich, not talking about someone said, Lord, I'd love to live on 10% of my income so I can give 90% to you. Lord, I'd love to be able to give millions of dollars to the gospel. Lord, I'd love to be able to feed the poor in my community. No, those who want to be rich, in other words, riches is the goal, not generosity, not giving, not serving, not helping. Riches is the goal. Those who want to be rich fall into temptation, a trap, and many foolish and harmful desires, which plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, and by craving it, some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pains. But you, man of God, run from these things and pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness. Then a little bit later in the chapter, 1 Timothy 6, beginning in verse 17, Paul writes this, instruct those who are rich in the present age not to be arrogant or to set their hope on the uncertainty of wealth, but on God, who richly provides us with all things to enjoy. Instruct them to do what is good, to be rich in good works, and to be generous, willing to share, storing up for themselves a good reserve for the age to come so that they may take hold of life that is real. All right. Here's what I want to pursue with you. And this is on the heels of a conversation I had with one of our missionaries serving in Peru, graduate from our ministry school, serving with his wife in Peru. And we were talking about the carnal prosperity message. We were on his podcast talking about my new book, Playing with Holy Fire, talking about the chapter, the Pep Talk Prosperity Gospel, and then talking about a healthy attitude towards money. Because there has often been a poverty mentality associated with the gospel, because of which the less I have, the holier I am. That's the mindset. We used to joke about it in the church where I got saved. They said, yeah, the pastor's so holy, he has holes in his shoes. And the mentality of the church leaders or the elders or the deacons, whoever set the pastor's salary, was you gave him a low salary to keep him humble, and that was helping him be spiritual. As much as the Catholic Church has much money and massive amounts of money, still priests take on a vow of poverty in the priesthood. And we all agree that it is profane and ugly and despicable when you have some pastor or some TV preacher or radio teacher or whoever that in manipulative ways raises funds for his or her ministry in order to get rich personally. It's one thing if God blesses you with an inheritance or through your hard work in ministry, money comes in to support your family, and God blesses you with extra. It's fine to have a nice home. It's fine to have a car, better have a car that runs than a car that breaks down. I found that I was no holier living in a small rundown place than a nice big place. I found that I was no holier having a car that didn't run versus a car that did run. Okay. These are all tools. We don't put our heart in earthly things, but we don't major on that. But here's what I want to challenge you with. All right. I want you to think about something. We all agree, or let's just say those of you with whom I'm in communication, we all agree on the abuses of the carnal prosperity message, a message that David Wilkerson said was birthed in the pit of hell. And when I was once talking to him about it, I said, hey, you said that the modern prosperity message was birthed in the pit of hell. He said it was. So this is something that we feel very strongly about, this idea that Jesus died to make you rich, or the good news that we preach to the poor is that you can be rich, and that you should put a picture of a Rolls Royce on your refrigerator and confess that until you own it. That is ridiculous. That is nonsense. And if you get that Rolls Royce, I'm not going to say, well, it must have been the Lord. Okay? I'm not saying that God never gave anyone a Rolls Royce. I'm just saying that if your means of getting it is, well, Jesus died to make me rich, and I'm going to go after riches, and the more I have, the more spiritual it proves, that's corrupt. I was at a meeting years ago, and I didn't get to my controversial point yet, where I really want to go with this. I was at a meeting years ago in England where I was speaking, and the speaker one night, I didn't go that first night, just flown in and was resting, but my colleague went, and he was shocked by the message. And one thing this pastor and TV minister said was that, and he was a person of color, just happened to be, and he said that white men come in his home to work on the house or something, and they're shocked to see a black man living like that, and he said it proves that there's a God in heaven, that he has a house like that. And I said to my colleague who reported on this, I said, so let's say next door to him is a mafia guy, some criminal who's gotten rich illegally and who's got an even bigger home. What does that prove? That there's a devil in hell? Come on. Many of the saintliest people that I know have very little in this world. Many of the saintliest people I know could care less about possessions in this world and are willing to leave everything to follow Jesus any day. At the same time, now is where I want to dig a little bit, all right? We can have an unhealthy poverty mentality. So you tell me which is better. Well, I don't want to be really careful with funds, and I want to make sure I watch every dime. Commendable attitude. Trust me, the money that comes in our ministry, I'm very jealous that it's used properly, that people who give know that their funds are being used rightly. I'm very jealous of that, all right? But you can have this mentality. You can be so careful and you get a little extra. You almost feel bad for it, and you don't want to get something better that works better, so you can communicate better to people, or a car that runs so you can get to your meetings on time because you don't want to get worldly. And so you have a poverty mentality, and because of which people probably that work near you, they don't have enough, and then probably you give very little to help others because you have so little coming in. Then you have some other ministry, and maybe they talk about money a little too much. And maybe they overemphasize God's abundant supply a little bit. We're not talking about just carnal prosperity messages. Let's say you got this one swings this way on the pendulum a little too far. You got this one swings a little too far. But because they have this vibrant faith, and because they believe that God's a generous, big God, that they give millions of dollars every year to missions, and they take better care of their staff and employees, and they are generous to a fault, helping those in their community with genuine needs. So you get the one wants to be so careful, doesn't want to dishonor God, every little penny, and extra comes in. Like I said, you're almost ashamed of it, and oh, that's extra. What are we going to do with it? And then you are not a good conduit for finances. You are not a good conduit for giving. And the other is like, hey, I don't care if I have a nice house, small house, doesn't matter. But right now I've been blessed with a nice car. Hey, it doesn't matter to me. It's just a car, but I get around better. And this person has a certain attitude towards money, and they end up giving away tons of money to help other people in ministry. In fact, the guy kind of with the poverty mentality, they support him. And you think, okay, we want to be so careful and honoring to God, but sometimes we don't honor him in other ways, because of which we are not conduits. God can't trust us with riches because we have a poverty mentality. The other person that we're criticizing is generous and gives and is not caught up in material things. Yeah, the carnal prosperity message, that's corrupt, that's destructive, that's harmful. We utterly reject that. But there's an attitude of generosity and faith that generates funds for the kingdom. And that's a good thing. That's healthy. We'll be right back.
Don't let. I want to present to you a unique way that you can partner together with me to reach Jewish people with the good news of Jesus, Yeshua, the Messiah. Hey, Paul wrote that the gospel is to the Jew first, but many of us don't know how to reach the Jewish people with the gospel. Can I tell you, we have a unique open door, and Jewish people are ready to hear, but we need your help. When I was in Israel recently, my last hour in Jerusalem, about a dozen different people came up to me, and they wanted to thank me for the impact of our message. One Jewish woman came up to me, a believer in Jesus. She said, "You saved my son's life. He was falling away. He was getting pulled by other objections to Jesus. He read your material. He's back in the faith." A young man came up to me. He said he and his Orthodox Jewish friends, here he is, I mean, with the yarmulke, the head covering, the traditional Jewish outfit, he said he and his Jewish friends, his Orthodox friends, watch my debates with rabbis. A few years ago, I was able to lead a Holocaust survivor to faith in Jesus. He was a brilliant man, an atheist who had fled the Holocaust. He read my books on answering Jewish objections to Jesus, came to faith, led his wife to the Lord before they left this world. Friends, we have the resources. We have books ready to be translated in Hebrew to be distributed in Israel. We have our Real Messiah website, unique for reaching Jewish people, Orthodox Jews with the gospel, ready to be translated in Hebrew, ready to do internet campaigns to get into every home in Israel. Every cell phone in Israel can have this message, but we need your help. Every gift to our ministry will literally help us reach another Jewish person with the good news of Jesus the Messiah. Go to askdrbrown.org. askdrbrown.org, and when you go there, we will partner together to bring salvation to Israel and the Jewish people. Together, we're making a great difference.
Now is the time to reach the lost sheep of the house of Israel, to share in this end-time harvest of Jewish souls, and to find out how to receive this 2-DVD set, Predestination, Election, and the Will of God Debate. Go to AskDrBrown.org and click the TV banner.
Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
So I want to challenge your thinking here for a minute. If you're a pastor, if you're a ministry leader, if you're a businessman, businesswoman, if you are someone just getting started in ministry work, want to go on the mission field, if you're a college student, wherever your background, I want to challenge your thinking for a little while, all right? I first spoke at Gateway Church in Grapevine, right? That's Dallas, Texas. Pastor Robert Morris, whom we're praying for complete recovery of a real serious health attack he recently had. I first spoke there about 14 and a half years ago. I know precisely because it was a weekend when our second grandson was born. And I was curious to see how much they talked about money. Why? Well, I'd heard of the church from a friend of mine that was serving in the ministry there. Told me how it had grown rapidly and now was maybe several years old. It had over 3,000 people. Today it's probably 35,000 people, one of the largest churches in America. And I had been sent Robert Morris's book, The Blessed Life. And if I didn't know the person that sent me the book, was a personal friend of Pastor Morris, I would have thought, stories here are crazy. I mean, gave all these cars away, gave away everything he had. God gave this. I mean, it really happened. And anyway, I was curious to see, with a strong message of generosity that the church preached, how much time they took on the offerings. I wanted to see. I was curious. So the first weekend was 2 Saturday night services, and then it was 3 Sunday morning services. That was the schedule. So 5 services I was going to speak in. And my custom is, when there are multiple services in a weekend, that normally the first one I'll be in from beginning to end. I'll be in through all the worship, through all the announcements, and then preach. And then the other services, I'll be in for part of them. Obviously, you're busy. There's a lot going on that weekend when you're speaking that many times. Sometimes you just need to come back and rest a few minutes between services. And then I don't like it to be a monotony where I sing the same songs every time and tire of anything. So the first service, I'm there from the first minute until the last. And I get introduced to speak, and I think, what happened? They didn't receive an offering yet. I was curious to see how much time they spent on it. Did they overemphasize money? Did they push hard? And I thought, they didn't receive the offering. How's this work? Did they do it month? No. What? So I figured, okay, they'll receive the offering at the end of the service after I preach. That's odd. So I finished the message. We do the altar ministry, whatever. And then the Pastor Robert, wasn't there. He was traveling back that day. Another pastor gets up and he dismisses the people. And he said, "Oh, if you're visiting, the way we give, we have boxes in the back." I thought, you didn't even receive an offering. You didn't say a word about money the whole time. Now, I believe maybe once in a year, Pastor Robert would teach about biblical principles on giving or something like that. Or maybe through a membership class, they'd lay out some of what they believe, or people would get the book. But in the service, they didn't even receive an offering. Now, I believe to this moment, among megachurches in America, that per capita, far and away, Gateway has the highest giving rate of people in the congregation. And they're also in a wealthy area near in Dallas, greater Dallas, Grapevine. And they've got people coming there, CEOs and athletes and different ones, and higher salaries, etc. But per capita, they have the highest giving rate. And as of, I'm going back now, 3 years, about 3 years, maybe a little longer, they were giving away $1 million a month to missions. $1 million a month to missions. And remember, they don't pass the plate. They don't receive offerings in the service. All right? So in the book, The Blessed Life, Robert talked about 3 different types of mentality. The poverty mentality, the prideful mentality, and the grateful mentality. I think those are the 3 words he used, but I have the substance of it. Read the book years back. So if you have a poverty mentality, let's just say that God blessed you with a good car, a nice car, and it's best car you had. A friend, a rich friend, said, "Hey, I want you to have this, man. Your car is always breaking down. You're late for work and stuff, and I have a car dealership. God's blessed me abundantly, and I just want to bless you with this car. Brand new car. It's yours. It's paid for." And you're driving that car, and I come up to you, and I say, "Hey, man, that's a nice new car. Beautiful." And you say, "No, look, it's not my, I mean, someone gave it to me. I really don't deserve something like that." That's a poverty mentality. And I realized, because I've been so careful in ministry over the years, I've been so conscious about salaries. I've been so conscious about the fact that people are giving. People with little money are giving. People are giving sacrificially to help our work. And you don't want to have too much. And even though we've had nice homes and things like that through real estate, just a prospered or whatever, or a family member, we inherited money and we're able to get a nice piece of property, whatever it is, I feel like I always had to explain it. I always had to, and I thought, wait a second, if God blessed me with the thing, I should just be thankful. I'm generous. Our ministry gives. We believe God for funds. We're always stretched out. There's always another ministry project. God moves on you today to send us $100,000. We'll use $100,000 probably within a week for ministry projects. Trust me, we are stretched out and we support workers all around the world. And yet I realized in a subtle way, I kind of had that mentality. Even though at times we've had nice things, and I've kind of had that mentality. Then he talked about the prideful mentality. So same deal, you got this brand new car. Maybe you earned it. You get this brand new car, and I come up to you and say, "That is a nice car. That's a beauty." And you say, "You should see my Lamborghini at home. This is nothing. I just drive this to work because I don't want to get nicks." That's a prideful mentality. But the grateful mentality, "Hey, that's a beautiful car you got. Yeah, thank God, isn't it? The Lord really blessed me with this." And that's the kind of mentality. It's just the thing itself. That's not the big deal. We're just passing through this world. having things, not having things is not the sign of spirituality. And we're not to put our trust, our heart, our desire in earthly riches and love those things. So if you have a lot, great, rejoice in it. If you have little, great, rejoice in that. Paul said, though, I know how to abound. I know how to be exalted. I don't know how to be abased. I know how to have a lot. I know how to have a little. Some of us know how to have a little, but we don't know how to have a lot, because of which we are not as blessed as we could be with the ability to help others. That's the whole thing I'm talking about. With the ability to help others and bless others and be a conduit to others. So here I'm really spiritual. I kind of have this poverty mentality. And God sees he really can't trust me with a multi-million-dollar budget, because I'm going to either be apologizing for it the whole time, or feeling guilty about it, or afraid to use it. And then the prideful one, God can't bless that person and trust them with multi-millions because it's all about them. But then there's someone else that has a spirit of generosity and faith and says, yeah, Lord, I'm believing for millions of dollars for the gospel. And in the process here, let's say that you have a goal to have a multi-million-dollar business because you want to you want to fund feeding programs in the inner cities of America, or you want to rehab the educational system and it's going to take money, or you want to support missionaries going into tribal regions in India. And you say, Lord, give our company $100 million, Lord, and we will be generous. Give our company $1 million, whatever it is. And whatever you start with, when he gives you $10, you immediately give the first fruits to missions. You prove yourself to be good stewards. You prove yourself to be people of faith and all this, right? And in the process, maybe your company goes from $100,000 a year to $20 million a year. And with that, you end up getting a nicer car. Okay, but that's not the goal. That's not the goal of it. That wasn't the goal of a nicer car. And you're not going to have this endless process of it's got to be the new Lamborghini every month. No, that would be, now you've become covetous, worldly, carnal, if that was the case. But the idea that as God is blessing your business, and the whole reason you've been praying for blessing on your business is so that you can fund the gospel more. Boy, I love our church. I love our pastor, but there's so little funds there. Everybody's squeezed, and the youth pastor has to work 3 jobs, and the children's pastor doesn't have enough money to put food on the table for the kids. We want to do better. I want to help out the church. I want to give with generosity. Can we be trusted with funds? Or do we have the poverty mentality, because of which God can't trust us with an abundance because we don't know how to handle it, and we aren't going to be able to pour it out on others? Or do we have the prideful mentality where we become covetous and greedy and think that it's all about me? Or do we have a spirit of gratefulness and generosity that says, Lord, we're here to be a blessing, and these are just earthly things. This doesn't make us. Money doesn't make us or break us. We serve you, not mammon. So Lord, entrust us with whatever you want. Money itself is not sinful. The love of money is sinful. Entrust us with an abundance. These are tools, and we want to use these tools to further the gospel. And maybe if you have a little bit better car when you go to your business appointments, you can take people out for lunch better and associate with certain people. And it's just a tool, doesn't go to your head. And you get a few better suits and outfits to interact with certain people, because you're going to meet with certain people in certain prominence. And you begin to do that, and you begin to bring in more money, and you begin to give away more money for the gospel. And you live a godly life. Isn't that a good thing? Let's not get so spiritual about money that we become unspiritual when it comes to it. Hey, I hope this helps. Back with you on Thoroughly Jewish Thursday tomorrow.